with you today and with Mark Hobbs from Fundmetric. I knew of Mark's work through a donor participation project colleague, Cameron Hall, who was raving about you and your product, Mark. So it's been amazing to be able to connect over the last few months. And we connected, a while back, and I was really interested in the type of work you were doing, and I had lots of questions. As somebody that's kind of somewhat knowledgeable, but not a whole lot, right? Which I think maybe people can relate to that. So welcome, Mark, and feel free to tell us about Fundmetric, how kind of what your background was that led you to build this type of company.
Sure. So, in a lot of ways, I got my first exposure to sort of philanthropy when I was asked by a student group to make a large gift to the university, and I ended up connecting with the advancement folks at my university. We made the gift. We went through the proposal, went through stewardship. I was really fascinated by that process, being a student, and the account we were sitting on had a lot more money in it, and there were only a few purposes that we could use those funds. One of them was to provide more scholarships, and I just thought that it would be great that they'd be back in touch. And so when they came.
Mm-hmm.
When it came time to graduate, they had not been back in touch. And so I ran over and just said, "Hey guys, there's a lot more money in the account, a big opportunity here. I'm leaving, but I'm just curious." And they said, "Oh, well, we knew that there was money in the account, but you didn't pop up in CRM basically." And I made the mistake or had the good fortune of asking, "Well, is there something I could do about that?" And so they went
Mm-hmm.
in there tinkering with their CRM, putting together some things, and that led to working with a number of institutions, hospitals, things like that, to do technology. And basically, um, that became the beginning. And I
Amazing.
worked in advertising, so I worked in loyalty programs, doing things like that, and really in customer retention was sort of the area I was interested in. We use data to bring customers back into stores. We knew sort of what to send customers. And when I turned around after a few months, I had hired a couple engineers and a PhD in machine learning to sort of bring some of this to the nonprofit space. And that's how we got started. So it really was sort of taking that for profit knowledge and bending it to fit the donor journey that a lot of these constituents were on. And we saw some phenomenal results with some relatively simple data science. So, we do AI, and that's part of what we do, but a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of it is not, um, well, it always starts with common sense, and it starts with that donor. So that's where we started. So,
Amazing.
um, yeah, that's how we get started.
Oh my. Okay, so let's dig into this. So you were in advertising before starting Fundmetric,
Yeah,
and kind of explain a little, if you'd care to
yeah,
explain a little bit more about advertising is huge. Like, what did you
right.
specialize in? And I imagine it had lots to do with things that you took over to fundraising.
Right. So in the beginning, I was in my dorm room. I was running a business to pay for school. To go way back, we were just building computers, building the odd website. It wasn't a real thing, but it for paid the bills,
Wow.
and I got elected to the student union that controlled a bunch of advertising on campus. And the day I got elected, one of the first things that happened was the advertising guy walked in and handed me his resignation. So um, it put a giant hole in the budget, and I reached out to a couple of people on campus, and they agreed to start an advertising agency. Um, and we had to go through a whole bunch of I guess, screens of conflict of interest and making sure that students could do this. Students had never done
Mm-hmm.
it, and all of these, there were a ton of issues with it. But they started
Mm-hmm.
out with one student publication, and by the end of their first year, they represented 29. And basically, in my spare time, when I'd figure out, we were across Canada, I believe, at one point, and we figured out that Facebook had a huge amount of data, and at the
Mm-hmm.
time it was much more open. No one had sort of seen this before, and we were able to use geographic locations basically to figure out who would send their money back home, and that
Mm-hmm.
would, we'd then target them with ads. So what I got really good at, in fundraising parlance, they probably call it segmentation, um,
Mm-hmm.
but it was audience building essentially.
Yeah.
I became the best at audience building, even though the first year I didn't work at the agency. I joined when I graduated, and we sort of ran that for um, 3 or 4 years, and over that time had to give back to the community. It was really important to all of us to play a role in giving back, and of course we gave our treasure, but we also sort of gave our time and talent, and so that talent sort of changed the game for us. As
Mm-hmm.
time went on, we were able to do more and more complex audience segmentations and really
Wow.
figure out what audiences cared about, not in terms of what they would necessarily tell us, but also how they would behave. So everything from events to, this person will likely RSVP, but maybe won't quite make it to the event, but the affinity is very high. Those types of things. And because we were so connected to campus life, it was a lot of the things that students were doing. We were able
Mm-hmm.
to directly figure out things like, young alumni are going to be very hard to give. We didn't realize we were figuring those out at the
Mm-hmm.
time, but we were sort of recording that stuff along the way and just keeping kind of mental notes of how people behaved. And then when we got into, our local hospitals asking for help and things, connecting Blackwood products and doing technical things, a lot of times it would be like, well, we just ran this quick query and here, and they, go off
Mm-hmm.
and do their process. But we learned just as much along the way, and it was that sort of partnership that really led to somebody one day turning around and saying, I don't think we want to do for-profit advertising as much as we want to do this stuff, and let's
How
see if
cool.
there's a business. And there's a
And
bunch of stuff in the middle.
the rest is history.
Yeah.
Um, so, Mark, we both. So, I mean, for those who are new here today, I host an organization, and we have several members of it here, Olivia, and that's called the Donor Participation Project. And a lot of it is about getting more donors to participate in ways that are more equitable, inclusive, kind of thinking that participation in a very broad sense and maybe engagement, those things that you look at, Mark, lead to giving,
Sure.
rather than the other way around. But there are also, like, how do you, there are some ethical kind of, and you talked about segmentation, and Facebook itself has gone through a evolution
Mm-hmm.
over time. From a 10,000 feet view, what is your take on, how much is okay to know about the behavior of our donors? How much is it like a creepy line? Is there a creepy line there, or is it worth it at the end? I don't know. Do you have a sense? How do you navigate all of this? Like maybe internally at Fundmetric.
Yeah, internally at Fundmetric, we have a rule that we try and follow, which is sort of opt in. So,
Mm-hmm.
whatever channel we're contacting somebody on, we want them to opt in. And I see Anne Murphy in the chat here. Hi, Anne. She did a great ML project with us, and we continue to work with her institution. But when we do that, we really look at behavior behind. Um, if somebody's not engaging, we
Mm-hmm.
don't want to harass them. So
Mm-hmm.
AI has that double-edged sword. Yes, it can go into the creepy realm. There's no doubt about that. The way we keep it out of that and sort of steer clear is if you're not responding to the first couple touch points, um, maybe we should respect that. And maybe that in itself is just as powerful as a signal for the people who do. And there may be
Mm-hmm.
another medium that you're willing to engage with us on. And we see that all the time. We also see it as a huge benefit for resource allocation. So for groups that we work with, including ourselves who are resource constrained, we sort of see it that way. But the first level is sort of opt in. The
Mm-hmm.
second level of it is if you're not engaging, that's not a bad thing. So removing sort of the judgment from, because certain people love text messaging, but certain people, it's a very personal thing to be able to get, people on text. I know people have different, some people
Mm-hmm.
accept anybody to LinkedIn, their open link, protocol or whatever. Some people, it's like if I haven't met you, you're not coming into the network.
Mm-hmm.
Or into their network. So it's different for everyone, but that signal I think is almost an obligation for institutions to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see that as crossing the line, but I do think that opt-in, while it's hit marketing extremely sort of pervasively, it really hasn't hit, and it does take time. There's a whole like sort of catch up because of the way email evolved as a medium, because of the way digital's evolved. There
Mm-hmm.
is sort of that understanding, I think, in the world, but I think now is the time when it's like, no, you can do a double opt-in to make sure you can email me. You can do these things. So Fundmetric builds that right into the base platform
Mm-hmm.
before we do any AI. And then we have an entire CIO Strategy Council membership, which is a Canadian organization, but basically they have a governance policy on AI. So we also adhere to that. And
Mm-hmm.
that covers things like we do have committees that look at bias to make sure that we are, not putting any features in that are biased and that are questioning us. And we have, a lot of peer-reviewed research. So not only going that direction, but hitting there. So those are just some of the ways that we deal with the couple of aspects of it. But there's certainly probably many more that can fill this time
No,
period.
I mean, and kind of from a ignorant point of view, I understand a lot of AI and machine learning to be able to pick up on trends that you may be seeing or not seeing in the data,
Mhm.
but then maybe some trends were, you don't want to reinforce. For
Right.
instance, having more elderly male white donors. And that may be a good solution from the AI's perspective, like you're going to make more money. Um, but it's just hard to, it seems to me that sometimes these things can creep in, right? If you're not doing like processes like the ones you mentioned.
Yeah, they can certainly creep in. The other thing that is an opportunity is to include groups that aren't. So it's pretty easy to see um, groups that aren't using AI. So groups that aren't engaging, aren't involved, maybe are are needing a special event or a special invitation or some sort of special outreach to build a bigger umbrella to make things more accessible. AI can spot that as well. So some of the things we do on that end are like volunteering opportunities, making sure that we have ways to engage community members, maybe not with their money or their treasure, so to speak, but
Mm-hmm.
with their time and making sure that it is inclusive. So we want to give everybody the opportunity within that boundary of respecting their preferences. And that's why, basic things like unsubscribe links, asking for feedback. A lot of what we'll do with the system is look at the feedback. If people aren't paying attention,
Mm-hmm.
That's not good for anyone. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not a judgmental signal. I think a lot of times the metrics we set up have inherently put in some biases towards like, well, this isn't effective. Well, it's not effective when you look at it by itself as one individual direct mail piece or one individual event.
Exactly.
But when you look at it across the donor journey, we start to see patterns where if they haven't done that, then the average gift stops climbing. Or if they haven't done that, then we really can't get them into planned giving, for example. So you'll see, a correlation between volunteering and planned giving, and for different groups, that may be very different in terms of the demographics. But when you start looking at how people react to some of the content, react to the behavior, and have a machine that can do those things, I actually think you can again flip AI to sort of look at those issues differently. The
Mm-hmm.
big, the bigger challenge I think is making sure that you don't have inherent bias in the data set itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not reinforcing that either intentionally or unintentionally. So, I mean, we try not to feed it in there in the first place. People's, um, um, there's just certain things that don't distinguish people that don't need to be put in, and
Uh-huh.
there's certain things that do distinguish people, and you can run both sets. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and you can run it both ways and see if there's a bias in there, very clearly.
Fascinating.
So
So you
that's
help
one
people,
way to
you
put it.
help people just to rephrase, see the bigger picture, maybe. Not, be careful. You're aware of the points where bias is typically inserted. You're trying to guard. I mean, I think we can all assume that most people are well intentioned, obviously. And if this, if it happens, it's like when Google had its missteps, etc. Obviously they weren't trying
Yeah.
um, to have those outcomes. Really interesting. Another, so you talk, Mark, in your LinkedIn, underneath in your tagline, you talk about relationships, and I thought that was really interesting from a platform that, presumably one can think is about optimizing solicitation.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? What do you see in the data of all that interplay? You talked about volunteerism, web behaviors. How do you see that reflect in, the giving decisions?
Yeah. Well, the way I kind of explain it to people is it's like the British won the Battle of Britain because they were able to have radar detection. So even though the Nazis had 5 times the planes that the British did, it was 5 to 1. The British knew where the planes were coming and were able to
Mm-hmm.
engage where the planes were coming. And we're sort of giving you that signal. We're not judging it, and we're certainly not pretending to build relationships. That part of the human experience is human, and I think you have to be um, human about it. I don't think it does any good to pretend we're a magic box or a black box that you can't see inside. There's certainly a level of math here that
Mm-hmm.
prevents some people from seeing inside in a technical aspect, but
Mm-hmm.
there's not. If you have a sufficient math background, you can see inside us to the same level as any other mathematician or data scientist or people in the field. So I think for us, it was really about the radar kind of provided in World War II, that warning system, that ability to see things on a different signal that wasn't available with your binoculars. AI's kind of got that same level, but it's not actually making the decisions about where to fly. That's still being done by the pilots and the people on the ground, and it's kind of the same parallel here in that you can do tremendously more operational activity, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily trying to boost the productivity. So if you're looking for something to send more emails out, probably not your answer. But if you're looking to send smarter, more targeted, and really respond to that particular constituent at scale the way they would want to be responded to, then we can provide some help and some assistance. And I think this is early your early phase of AI in machine
Mm-hmm.
learning. And just to capture it, machine learning is simply we take a data picture of the people who we want to find more of. We take a data picture of the people who aren't like that. So it could be people who have volunteered and people who have not. And we need both examples of those constituents. Then we ask the machine to figure out what is the commonalities, and we predict who's going to be likely to volunteer or
Mm-hmm.
who's likely to make a major gift. And we've done that to tremendous success from a monetary standpoint for a number of institutions. But
Mm-hmm.
we've always brought it back to we need the humans. We need to be real and sort of, I guess, human about it. And we are not out there soliciting gifts. We're not out there. I mean, we do annual giving solicitations within the system, and we do
Mm-hmm.
stewardship, and we do it intelligently. But it's because we're able to pull way more data because we've brought in, their gift count and all of these different data points into a centralized system, and we also put it out to any system you want. So this idea that data within your organization is sort of free to flow to where you need it, as opposed to you have to use our system. And that's why people generally talk about it being a layer that runs over top of multiple of their systems. But I've kind of gone off your
This
original
is
question.
fascinating. No, thanks, Mark. Anybody who's here on the call, if you have burning questions or if you're looking at lots of solutions that are talking about this, are using this language, right? I think this is a good chance to ask Mark questions now that we have an expert in the room and he can't go anywhere. Um, let's take advantage of this. I'll start with a question, Mark. It sounds like a lot of the work you do is pretty custom. So you've mentioned a whole range of things, from volunteerism to annual funds to plan giving to major gifts. Um, are there big buckets of type of work that you do? Does your platform, facilitate more of this type of thing versus that type of thing, or is it kind of you talk with the client?
Well, no, so we are a product, but it is custom. We find that our clients have nuances in their database. They have holes in their database. They have a number of different things that make sure that we tune our work to them. So I'm using very generic examples, and all of the examples I've used exist within the base platform. But you know, most of the major gift predictions are going to be major donors who are not assigned to a officer already and are likely to give in the next 12 months. So
Mm-hmm.
each of those sort of 12 months, whether they're already in portfolio or not, are choices that we sit down and make. But it is custom to each client, although we tend to get sort of a greatest hits list of things people would like to see come out of
Mm-hmm.
the platform. The other side of it is this is entirely built based on customers. So we started almost 10 years ago as a research project because we weren't sure that you can just take customer exactly what we're doing in like a CVS loyalty program or a Walgreens loyalty program and port it over. And it turns out you
Mm-hmm.
can't. There are some nuances in terms of predicting their donor journey and what affinity is. So really, we're a data generation ecosystem, and we're
Mm-hmm.
going to make sure that um, you have the training set you need for the future. So machine learning works on what we call training data, um, but basically, we're filling in a lot of holes on your data, not necessarily the things that you're missing from your database, but we calculate the time between when somebody hits a donation page and when they next engage with you. That type of tracking at scale requires um, a massive amount of manpower to do manually,
Mhm.
and a massive amount of infrastructure. And so by building this data set, and again, we're not doing this in a creepy way, for lack of a better term. We're doing this in the sense that these people have already opted in. They know that when they're logged into their accounts and doing these things, um, that we certainly don't want to communicate with them in ways they don't want to. And that sort of opt in makes it way more efficient. It's
Yeah.
essentially cutting your audience, targeting your audience, and that gives you way better returns. So we really focus on sending out communications that's going to build a data set before we focus on what the end results are. And frankly, if you're doing these things, kind of like good stewardship, um, the end results almost take care of themselves. You never want to speak too broadly on stuff like that, but if you're stewarding, if you're cultivating, if you're treating people the way they ought to be treated, and
Asking,
yeah,
surveying.
yeah, if you're using AI to help facilitate that, the numbers or the bottom line results sort of show up in remarkably strong ways. And it just sort of it goes back to that basics of, treat people the way you'd want to be treated, treat people the way they want to be treated, and then don't assume that you know how somebody's going to want to be treated until they're telling you. And one of the ways they tell you is by not opening the 48 emails you may have some, so that type of stuff. Um, you
I
know,
feel like sometimes I felt like putting a teaser in the envelope. We sent you this same appeal for the last 20 years. We hope this one works. Um,
uh,
well, this is fascinating, Mark. I'm pretty excited. I don't have a whole lot more questions other than, I'd love to just start, looking at my next step as as somebody on the fundraising side would be, oh my goodness, I need to take a look at this. So I hope people do connect with you. I think LinkedIn is a good place to reach out to you.
Yep. No, LinkedIn's great. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can find us, and our website's just fundmetric.com.
Okay, for those who may be curious, today's broadcast is being shown on Twitch because we have a gaming fundraising program going on. And I just learned that you could also broadcast things to Twitch. So, Mark, you may be becoming Twitch famous in the next few days if you have lots of gamer clients or streamers.
Well, gaming's a new way to fundraise, and Twitch has certainly got some major dollars coming through it. So,
Well, I'm sure you'd get a ton of data from that. There's a question from Ashley. What have you found is the best strategic move in opposition? Ashley, if you could explain a little bit more. I'm not sure we have enough to go on. Maybe it was, from the context a few minutes ago. Thank you, Olivia. Olivia's taking part in Level Up Your Gaming Fundraising, this course. So that's really cool that you're here today. And maybe we give Ashley a few seconds here to type a clarification in. But otherwise, I invite you to ask questions from Mark, to reach out to him, to check out Fundmetric, and let's keep this.
people being opposed to AI in general. Yeah, I think, in all honesty, um, I was I was opposed to producing a product that was overly complicated using trendy technology. And so my goal was never to develop an AI platform. And that's sort of how people have bucketed Funmetric. My goal was to develop something that was more responsive. And so the big thing I tell people is like, we developed something that actually engaged people, that actually worked. The numbers and case studies are there to show that, and it just happened that this particular type of technology worked really well. So I wouldn't necessarily position it as, if there opposed to AI in general. I mean, that's a bit broader of a topic, but I would say like this is being used to turn on your car headlights so that they're at the right brightness. It's being used to make sure you don't get into car crashes, and we're is it accelerating? Sure, it's accelerating, and some of the things that AI in general can do are scary or could be applied in very negative ways. There's no way to do this, but it just, you're right. It does seem to be an easier way to recognize patterns. It's also going to provide you with that opposite. So, I mean, we tend to see the colors on the page and not the white space. And I think that AI can really highlight some of that white space in terms of the patterns. I also think that it can show you how people want to be communicated with without necessarily pushing you to have all of the data. I mean, there is a very high probability that certain people want to be communicated a certain way, and then another certain group doesn't. The level of liberty you take with that information, it varies by organization. So we have some groups that will tell you they used to call, I don't know how many thousands of people it was, and we got them to 95% contract rates. That is so much more rewarding for a student caller, that I think there's tangible examples that can sort of sway the boat. And I wouldn't put too much on AI, because anything that is saying they're AI driven, like, it's also a car. So the self-driving car is also a car. It's not just AI. And so we're a lot more than just AI, but we do have that layer in there. It is our sort of bona fide expertise, but it is
Hmm.
not why we did this. And we didn't, we also did it before it was cool. I would point out that when we started, no one was putting this on the front of their home pages um, for products. And so, I hope that answers your question.
I
And
think
thank
that was
you
a
for,
beautiful answer, Mark. Thanks so
yeah,
much. If people
yeah.
have more questions, so okay, reach out to the expert here. We also have a Q&A site for the DPP community that we just launched. So head over there to the link and help out a colleague with sometimes like knowledge is distributed asymmetrically. So you have a lot of knowledge on some things and you could be helping people tremendously. Let me see. Mark is sharing his email. Mark, is it okay if I chat it
Yeah,
in?
I was going to ask you. I'm not sure how to put it into the
I'm on my cell phone, so I just type it
yeah,
in here, and we'll
perfect.
do that for
And I'd
everybody.
just like to put out a shout out to the donor participation project. For anyone watching on our streams right now, this is one of the projects that's been really gaining traction on LinkedIn. Lewis has done some phenomenal work. I've been following it for months now, and if you're looking to get the latest information, these streams that he's doing, as well as the larger community, is the place to reach out. So, Lewis, thanks for all the effort and time that you're putting into this.
Thanks, Mark. We're over 2,000 people signed up who really want to change the way we fundraise, and I think there's no one solution. Part of it is tech and partnering with really bright people like you and your company. Part of it is relationship building, more strategic stuff. Part of it is just saying this is a priority for us. So I think between all of us, we can really kind of turn the boat around. So really appreciate having you making the time today to join, Mark.
No, thank you
And
so much.
we'll be in touch.
Yep.